Hi, welcome back to my channel. So today is our final day of Bookmas. It's Bookmas Day 12. This has gone up a little later than I would have liked just because I was trying to get them up consecutively, but life happens. My toddler got really sick. My husband had to go out of town. So I was solo parenting a very sick toddler. And if you have kids, you know exactly what that means. That means just surviving. So that's kind of what I was doing the last few days. Thankfully, she's feeling much better and we're kind of back in our routine. So I am here to do my final day of Bookmas. I thank you guys so much for being here and being part of these little casual bookish videos that I've been making. I've really been enjoying it and been able to talk about a lot of things that I wouldn't normally make time in a regular video to talk about. So that's been really fun. So today I thought I would kind of briefly go over my 2025 goals and talk about my 25 books that I want to read in 2025. Let's get started. Let's first talk about goals. Last year, I made a few goals for myself that was, I started out the year saying I was going to read 50 books. I blew past that in the first half of the year, I believe. And I was like, well, I'm just going to up it to 100. If I'm on this pace, I'll hit 100. So this year, I'm not going to up that goal. I'm going to keep it, I think, at 50 and take my time kind of reading more intentionally and reading the books that I really want to read. There was quite a few books this year that I made a goal of reading because they were popular books in like the book space. And so I wanted to read them to kind of see what all the hype was about. There was a few books that stood out that I enjoyed, but the majority of the books that I liked were books that I picked out for myself. So I think I need to get back to just worrying about what I want to read and not worrying about what everybody else is loving. So that's my first goal, is to just stick with my 50 book goal for 2025 and read more intentionally and pick out books that I'm actually really interested in, which leads me to, I think I'm going to unhaul some books that I have on my shelf. One, I'm going to unhaul some of the books from my red stack from this year after I do my end of the year video. I've been kind of just holding on to some of those books because I want to include them in my year-end wrap-up. And then two, there's some books on my shelves that I have not read yet that I just keep looking at them and they're never calling to me. And I think it's just time to let those books go, minimize my unread shelf to the books that I'm excited to read. I will probably do a video about that in the new year, which books I kind of let go, and I'll figure out if I'm going to, donate, sell, whatever then. Anyways, that was kind of a tangent, but 50 book goal next year, more intentional reading. I also want to do kind of a challenge for myself. There is so many authors that I really enjoy that have kind of a backlog of books, and I wanted to choose one author this year that I really enjoy that I would like to read their backlog. And obviously some authors are way more prolific than others, but one author that really stood out for me this year in my reading and also just in the book social content area, I guess you would say, is Ann Patchett. I've really enjoyed her commentary on recommending different books and her thoughts on different books on her Parnassus TikTok. I think I've read 3 books total from her, and she has quite a backlog of books that I either have in my physical TBR or have had on my brain that I would like to read. So I think I'm going to pick Ann Patchett as my 2025 author to read, and I'm going to try to get through as many of her books as possible. And I want to stick to the books that are more of the popular ones. I mean, she probably has some obscure ones, but I want to stick to the more main backlog that she has. So that's very exciting. I think I own like 3 of hers that I have unread right now, and then I can just either pick up the other ones or borrow them from the library. Officially, I've chosen Ann Patchett as my author to read in 2025. So I think that'll be a fun kind of different challenge for me. And I already know I like her writing, so I'm just gonna, get into her other books that I haven't read. And then lastly, one of the goals that I would like to implement is I want to read more nonfiction this year. I really enjoy nonfiction, but I seem to not, well, I guess I do kind of read quite a few memoirs, which are considered nonfiction, but I want to read even more. And so I want to make kind of a goal of mine to pick up more of my nonfiction reads and learn more and just incorporate that into my TBR more. Pretty easy goals, I think. It's 50 books this year, and reading more intentionally with those books. And then it's reading Anne Patchett as my author of 2025 to read, and then reading more nonfiction. Easy, doable. I think I'm going to stop there with the goals and just kind of leave it at those three that are attainable, but is kind of a little bit of a challenge for me. Okay, so now that we kind of talked about my goals, let's talk about my 25 books for 2025. I made a list on my phone. I was kind of looking at what I had on my physical TBR. Most of these books are going to be off of my physical TBR, and then I have some that I'll probably either pick up used or get at the library. And just like from last year, near the end of the last half of last year, I was kind of picking up more used books and borrowing from the library more. So I want to obviously continue doing that. And I have some of these books, but I didn't want to like gather them from all around the house. So I'm just going to put up a little image here of the book. The first book I want to read is Martyr. This was a really popular book. It was on a lot of end of the year lists, and I've had it since it was released. I actually pre-ordered this book and was really excited about it and just never got around to it. So the first book I'm going to do is Martyr. And the second one is kind of a little bit of a cheat, but it is the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So I read the first one, and then I have 2 and 3 to read. They're very easy reads and they're not very long. So I'm combining the second and third book as one in this category, and I want to finish that series. I have both books and I have been wanting to get around to them, so that is my second book for my 2025 list. Then I have The Nickel Boys. I haven't read any Colson Whitehead before, and this one has really intrigued me. I've heard great things. I've heard this is a lot of people's favorite. I know he has another really popular one, The Underground Railroad, but I've heard a lot of people prefer The Nickel Boys, and I think they made a movie or a TV show based on this, so I would love to read the book first and then maybe check that out. The fourth one is Richard Powers, which is obviously an author, or maybe not obviously, but is an author. I'm going to do this for some of my picks. I have a few books, or not a few, I have 2 books from Richard Powers, so I want to read one of them. So either it is Overstory, which I have, and then I also have Playground, which was his new release last year. So I'm putting on the list Richard Powers, so I will read one of his books. I may end up reading both, but I just wanted to include him and put that I will read one of the 2 books that I own of his. Next we have We Begin at the End. This book is by the same author that did All the Colors of the Dark, or All the Colors in the Dark, and that was a really popular book this year. I actually really enjoyed it, and I had We Begin at the End before that book came out, and I actually ended up skipping that and just going straight to All the Colors in the Dark because it was so popular and it was on a lot of book clubs. So I'm gonna go and read We Begin at the End. I heard that one is also really good, so I'm excited to get to that one, and I know that I like Chris Whitaker's writing style, and if it's anything like the other book, it'll be really fast-paced and it'll be kind of a good mix of lit fic, mystery, thriller. Then another one of those books where I'm kind of just picking an author and I will read one of theirs is Barbara Kingsolver. I have Poisonwood Bible and Prodigal Summer. So for this one, I will read one of her books that I own, either Poisonwood Bible or Prodigal Summer. I don't know which one. It'll kind of probably be whatever I'm in the mood for. Like I said, maybe I'll end up reading both, but I didn't want to put them both on the list and take up 2 slots. I just wanted to put her up there that I do want to read another Kingsolver book. Then we have another author that I've been really wanting to read, and I actually have a few of her books, but I've kind of chosen this one specific book because it's the one that I want to read first from her, and it is Zadie Smith's On Beauty. I have a beautiful, I think it's a first edition. It's a hardcover copy, and it's signed by Zadie Smith, and I think it was on a lot of, or I think it was on the New York Times Best 100 Books from the 21st Century, and so I've been really wanting to read it, so I'm including On Beauty as one of my 25 for next year. Next, I have Jane Smiley's Some Luck, and this is the first in a trilogy of hers. I'm not committing to reading the whole trilogy next year, but I am committing to starting it, hopefully, and I have this whole trilogy in hardcover. I think they're all first editions, and I think either the first or second book I have signed, so she's definitely an author I haven't read from that I would really like to get into, and I think this is a really popular trilogy that she did, so I am going to commit to reading the first book in that trilogy, Some Luck. Then I will talk about it more in my December wrap up. But I read Percival Everett's Erasure this month. And obviously, he's been kind of like the author of the year. He won the National Book Award with James. And I haven't read James, but I do hope to read that as well. But I wanted to put his book that I own on this list, and it is Trees. I know that I like his writing style, and I know he's very like satirical, smart, clever type of like writer, and I have Trees on my bookshelf that I really want to get to, so I'm gonna put Percival Everett's Trees on my list. Next up, we have a book that was actually a book that I really wanted to read this year. I just didn't get around to it, but I've heard so many great things about it. It is a historical fiction, but I think it kind of has like a good, fun twist to it. I don't know a whole ton about it, and that is When We Lost Our Heads. This cover you've probably seen, it's really pretty, like bright, eye-catching cover. It's very different than what you think of historical fiction, and I like historical fiction, and I heard this one is great, so I want to get to this book this year. Then we have a book called Greenwood, and this book seems just right up my alley. It follows a family through generations, and I think it somehow connects them to trees or the wilderness or something, and I love nature connections with generational stories of people and families. So it seems like it'd be a perfect book for me. So I'm very excited about it. I haven't heard a ton of people talk about it, but from what I read online, it is a really well-liked book. Then I have another one of those little author picks that I have, and it is Louise Erdrich. I have The Roundhouse, and then I think I have another book of hers, Love Medicine. And I don't know which one I'm going to read, but I know I will read one of the ones I own. So probably either be, I think it's only those two I own. Maybe I own a third. I'm not sure. I'll have to look. But I know I want to read one of her books that I own. And I know she's a really well-known author. She had a new release last year called The Mighty Red, which I was really interested in, but I'm really trying to prioritize the books that I own that are on my shelves. So I think I'll either read The Roundhouse or Love Medicine. And then I have Tommy Orange's There There. I still have not gotten to this. It is very short, so I think it'll be a really quick read. I've heard amazing things about it, and I would really like to read it and then maybe read his other book, Wandering Stars, which is his more recent release. So There is on my list. You've probably seen it everywhere, and I haven't heard any bad things about it. And then I have And the Mountains Echoed, and this is by Khalid Hosseini, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He wrote two of my favorite books, A Thousand Splendid Suns and Kite Runner. Those two books are probably in my top 10 of all time. I just love his writing. I love how connected and how emotional his characters are, and I just think he is just such an amazing writer. I have been kind of holding off on this book because I have loved his two other ones, and so I'm a little nervous that, you know, I may not love the third one, or the total other end of the spectrum all love it, and so I'm kind of like pushing it off. You know, when you like push off books that you know you're gonna like oddly. So that one I have to get to this year. And then I have some of the big books that I talked about in my big books video, and that is I Am Rome, which I talked about. I want to get to this book. I have East of Eden, which is Steinbeck, which is his kind of magnus opus that I would like to read this year. And then I have The Will of the Many, because I'm probably not going to get to that by the end of this year, and it was on my list and I just didn't get to it. So pushing that one on to next year. Then I have Lonesome Dove, which I'm super excited to get into and just kind of like sit with and marinate with, but it is a big book, so that one is one of them. And then I have Stephen King's 11/22/63, which everybody loves. I heard it's one of his most loved books. My sister loves it. I have to read it, and I like Stephen King, and I've been really kind of craving to read more Stephen King after I read his short story collection, You Like It Darker. And then I have The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. That's been a book I've been eyeing for quite some time, along with The Heart's Invisible Furies, and this is another book that is a big book that I talked about in my big books video that I would like to get to. And then the last few books are nonfictions, and these are nonfiction books that I'm really excited to read. I'm hoping to obviously read more than this, but these are the ones that I made for my 25 TBR must-read list. The first one is Underland. I picked this one up in like September when I visited family and friends in California. There's something about it. I think it talks about like in the under in the earth and nature. I'm not sure, but I read the first few pages and I was like, wow, I really just need to take my time with it. So that is the first pick for my nonfiction books. Then I have Little Devil in America by Hanif Abderraqib. I read his book There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. Really enjoyed it. I have his book that was released before that, Little Devil in America, that I want to get to. So I would really like to get to that one. And I've heard that that one is just as amazing. Then I have Behind the Beautiful Forevers. This was one of those books that I saw on that 100 Best Books of the 21st Century, the New York Times article. And it just really caught my eye. I really was interested in what the premise is, and I have a copy and I really want to get to it. Then we have Falling Leaves. I read this author's book, Chinese Cinderella, which I think is like Falling Leaves, but like a kid's version, which is Chinese Cinderella. So I think she wrote two books. I think it's about her life, and one was more targeted for kids to read, and then this one is more of the adult version. So I want to read that one. And then I think that's it. Obviously, these are just like my 25 for 2025. I'm hoping to read more. Like I said, my goal is to read 50. So I'm assuming the other 25 in that 50 will be other books that I own that I want to sprinkle in that I'm also interested in reading, or they could be new releases or new books that I hear about as the year goes on. And of course, I will probably go past that 50 mark, but I just wanted to be really conservative and really just allow myself to not worry about a TBR and let myself read the long books and take my time and know that I still will hit my goal at the end of the year. So I think I have like a good mix of books, and if I can read all of those books, I think I own like 80% of those books or 90% of those books. So that'll take off a big chunk of my physical TBR as well, which is always good. Those are kind of my plans for next year. I kind of thought it was fitting to talk about 2025 in my last Bookmas video. I plan on doing a year-end wrap-up video, and I may end up doing another video, but I don't want to put pressure on myself. So I'm going to do a year-end wrap-up video, which will hopefully come out end of the month with a December wrap-up video. I am just so thankful for you finding my little niche on the internet and for subscribing, giving me likes, commenting. I really, really appreciate it. It's so fun to hear other people's takes on what I'm talking about. I just love finding my people on the internet. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in my next video.